What did you just see? How well can you recall all of the images that were just presented? Were there truly any images at all? Think about the last time you went on a walk, maybe the last time you were at a movie theater. Think back to some of your fondest and most concrete experiences. How well can you truly recall them? How detailed can you be in these recollections before you hit a point of fabrication? If this point of no return truly does exist, then how can you be sure that these things ever happened in the first place? And if these things didn't happen, how does that change your perception of yourself? To what extent is everything you are doing now an extension of these possibly unverifiable memories? This dilemma around false memories, the line between dreams and reality, and the properties that define our stream of consciousness is what Chris Maker's 1962 time travel short film La Jetée is obsessed with. The 28-minute French experimental film uses its structuralist and idealistically surrealist form to create a circular time travel narrative, one that uses the concept of fourth dimensionalism and predetermination to further explore the depths of both the defining aspect to and the most questionable part of humanity, our memory. Before we delve into La Jetée itself, I think it is important to first define what an experimental film truly is, especially outside of the realm of amateur filmmakers who slap the title onto any short film with a little bit of saturation in a somewhat non-conventional narrative. Looking at Fred Kemper's aptly named Naming and Defining the Avant-Garde, aka experimental film, he sets up a 6-part test to define a film as experimental or not. Sure, this isn't the new coming of the 10 Commandments, but it's definitely a good guideline to base your vocabulary on. So let's put La Jetée on the spotlight. Inquiry 1 asks if the film is created by a singular person or a group with a minuscule budget in the assumption of a lack of monetary or popular success later on. And here Chris Maker plays an auteurist role in judging by the 28-minute short's placement on this 10 best low-budget sci-fi movies of all time list. I would go ahead and check this one off. Inquiry 2 is essentially the first half of Inquiry 1, so I'll check that off too. Inquiry 3 is an interesting one as in context to its time, the time travel narrative presented is definitely not conventional. Still though, it tells a somewhat linear story even if the plot isn't a straightforward one, and in conjunction with the fourth insight, the use of still shots to tell this linear story makes La Jetée completely unconventional. Insight 5 deals with the necessary subtext and commentary of an experimental film. In many cases, this is what experimental films offer when they don't have a linear narrative and care not for the entertainment of the viewer. Although La Jetée definitely doesn't not care for its viewers' entertainment, it does present useful commentary. Even beyond its analysis of memory, the role of the main character within the future society displayed offers a critique of the role of government during the Cold War and shortly after World War II, both of which were clearly on Maker's mind given the apocalyptic narrative and setting of La Jetée. And when it comes to Insight 6, I would actually agree that there is a clear univalent message in the film on one level, as I stated with my explanation of Inquiry 5, but on a completely different level that I'll touch on towards the end of this video essay, it is also left completely ambiguous. So according to Kemper's guidelines, La Jetée is definitely an experimental piece of media, and looking at it in context to Terry Gilliam's 1995 feature-length film, which takes heavy inspiration from La Jetée, we can get a deeper insight into the anatomy of an experimental film within these guidelines. While the plot of both works are nearly identical, a man living in a post-apocalyptic world is experimented on and used as a guinea pig to travel back into time, 12 Monkeys has a lot more story and big budget turn your brain off aspects to it, including a spy element which La Jetée thankfully lacks. This difference defines the main separation between the mainstream and the experimental to me. Experimental films care not for entertainment. Of course entertainment can be gained, but the main focus is moving the medium of film forward and questioning the absolutes set by society, such as the absoluteness of memory. And looking at La Jetée, the narrative elements popularized with the film go on to inspire so many other movies both in the mainstream and the avant-garde, something that many experimental films either inadvertently or purposefully end up doing. Looking through the century-long history of experimental film, the form has evolved quite a bit, undergoing movements just as mainstream film has. In the early 20th century, experimental films were defined by the avant-garde narratives within often conventional filmmaking. Seen in the films of Louis Buñuel and Carolee Schneemann, surrealism flourished. Films like Darren's At Land and Buñuel's Un Chien Andalou offered precise and poignant imagery that expanded the surrealist narratives presented. According to Sitney's visionary film, Images cinema emphasized the use of clear language and specific imagery to often depict a dream-like state in both the viewers and the characters.
Event B clearly appears to be causally connected to event A. Okay, now you begin to pull the narrative apart, I think, in film or in anything else, where those causal connections, A to B to C to D, become more problematical. Where the sequence of events, the sequence of causality becomes unclear or has to be inferred or constructed, or indeed where it falls apart.
However, as the 1950s and 60s rolled in and access to film equipment became much easier, experimental film began to become more structuralist, focusing on form more than narrative content as seen in the works of Michael Snow and Hollis Frampton. Thinking about the latter of the two filmmakers, a lot of Frampton's films feel like actual scientific experiments to me. For example, Lemon is a 9-minute experiment with lighting as the independent variable and the titular subject of the film, along with us as the viewers as the dependent variables. What is interesting about La Jetée is that it acts as the midpoint of structuralism, which dominated the avant-garde in the 1960s, while maintaining a focus on the narrative which surrealists experimented with. When it comes to the whole of the 1962 film too, Maker needed both of these aspects to truly make a movie from his original concept. Visually, La Jetée is composed of still shots, playing more like a photo book than a film, Maker himself calling it a photo novel. Prior to his shift to film, Chris Maker was a photographer who often created photo novels. This aspect is a completely structural extension of his pre-film career, experimenting with how a story can be told visually in film in the boundaries of what detriments the visual storytelling of the medium. Intriguingly though, many filmic elements are still employed by Maker even within the still photography. For example, Maker implements the framing of shots, altering of frame speeds to create tension, and the implementation of over-the-shoulder and shot reverse shots. Despite this though, the visual elements alone wouldn't create a full film, experimental or not. The narrative implemented through the narration is necessary for La Jetée to work as well as it does. On a macro level, the form of a film, especially before the age of digital media, played out a lot like the time travel narrative presented here. The viewer is interacting with the past as the filmmakers interact with the future, the film itself being the projection of time. On a micro level, the surrealist aspects induce a dreamlike state within the film, whilst the structuralist parts induce an adjacent relationship to temporality for the viewers.
It works because it's so technically brilliant. I mean, it works on a musical level. It's like we're listening to music in that one. It's the images are coming up, and the editing is the most extraordinary editing I've ever seen, because it's a rhythm he's setting up, and the the narrator's voice. You're dealing with poetry at this point.
It is clear by this point that La Jetée is a film about memory.
Ceci est l'histoire d'un âme marquée par une image d'enfance.
The creator-proclaimed photo novel is made of still images that examine moments, replicating both what our memories play out as and what photo albums capture. The filmmaking makes us feel stuck, forced to analyze each frame due to their newfound simplicity, no longer being provided constant motion like most films. This is exactly how both photos and memories tend to play out. Both can be altered and aren't 100% guaranteed versions of what happened, but they represent a stream of consciousness, proof of who we are and how we got to this exact moment. Similarly, La Jetée plays out like a dream presented as reality, or reality presented as a dream, however you want to see it. The main character constantly questions if his experiences are really happening or ever happened in the first place. At one point, he travels into the future and is offered a safer place with a more experienced version of reality, but the trap of nostalgia and wanting answers to the past catches him, ultimately leading to his own death, the same death that has been haunting him his entire life. Of course, this all does seem bleak, as many experimental films ultimately do, but Chris Maker here does provide some semblance of catharsis through the presentation of the time travel in a linear path constructed through predestination. Still though, our memory is presented as an all-engrossing circular trap, just waiting to catch us if meddled with.
Il courut vers elle. Et lorsqu'il reconnut l'homme qu'il avait suivi depuis le camp souterrain, il comprit qu'on ne s'évadait pas du temps. Et que cet instant qui lui avait été donné de voir enfant, et qui n'avait pas cessé de l'obséder, c'était celui de sa propre mort.
I've been working on me, baby. There's so much trauma in my life. I've been so cold to the ones who love me, baby.